Hi guys, welcome to Brain 9 in a Vat. My name is Dave and this is Building My Worldview. Before I start today, I would like to remind you about something about this playlist. The objective for me is not to convince you that my opinions are right and that as a consequence yours are wrong if you disagree with me. No, the way I see it is that a worldview is a network of definitions and ideas, ideally internally consistent. So your network is probably different from mine, but this doesn't mean that yours are wrong and mine is right. What I'm doing in this playlist is that I'm investigating ideas, definitions, and concepts to see how and if they fit into my worldview. My hopes is that we can do this together. I am learning a lot from researching for these videos, and I love to share these findings with you guys. It's most probably a different format for videos than what you are used to, but I hope that it is something we can overcome. Right, let's get started. I have made a trolley problem. It goes like this. An automated trolley is moving quite fast down some tracks. If nobody does anything, it will continue down track A without incidents. You, in the red jacket, are standing beside a lever. If you pull the lever, the trolley will be diverted onto track B, where a worker wearing a headset is doing maintenance. The worker won't hear the trolley coming. They also won't hear you if you try to warn them. So if you divert the trolley by pulling the lever, the trolley will likely hit the worker, and it's unlikely that they will survive that. What do you do? This is the second video in a mini-series about opinions. Each of the videos are made as standalone episodes. It's therefore okay for you to finish watching this before you go and find the first video. In the first video, I talk about why I think it's important to have a relationship with opinions and what is and isn't opinions. In this video, I will talk about personal ethics in relationship with opinions. What I think of as personal ethics is a set of standards that one has set for oneself. This can be based on personal conviction or what aligns with the worldview, but it must be something that that person has thought thoroughly through and decided for themselves. It's not enough that the person knows about the standard and consider it sound. They must have actively incorporated it themselves into their worldview. Best way to describe it is that it must be their opinion. So you must have opinions about ethics to have a personal ethics. This also means that if somebody don't have opinions about ethics, they don't have a personal ethics. Remember, this doesn't mean that they don't have ethics at all, just that they don't have a personal ethics. I am also of the opinion that what most people are doing when evaluating what actions are permissible in a situation have very little to do with actual ethics. What most people are doing instead is that they are applying a heuristic, a simplified strategy simulating ethics. This is done by evaluating what they think others expect them to do or what others will permit them to do in the situation. This means that what is permissible for most people at any one time are relative to who the others in the situation are and what situation they are in. This is reflected by cultural tropes like bad behavior can be explained by somebody hanging out with a bad crowd, and that you can know someone on the friends they are hanging out with, and so on. People are not expected to have deep thoughts about ethics. Oh, I almost forget to tell the rest of the trolley problem. You work at the trolley company. Your job descriptions include that you are supposed to diverge all trolleys marked with a B onto track B. In addition, the CEO of the trolley company is standing right beside you. When you raise concerns about the worker on track B, the CEO instructs you that personal safety on site is none of your concern. He is informing you that you are to perform your duties as described in your job procedure at all times unless directly instructed to do otherwise by your immediate supervisor. He also specifies that this trolley that is on its way right now is to be diverted onto track B, and that the worker shouldn't have been there in the first place. They should have been already finished with the maintenance work before the trolley arrived. Your choice right now are as follows. 1. Do what your job procedure demands, what your CEO commands, and diverge the trolley onto track B, despite the huge risk of causing harm and possibly death to the worker. Or disregard your job instruction and the direct command from the CEO of your company and let the trolley continue down track A, causing no risk of harm to anyone, but at the risk of losing your job and getting a bad resume. What do you do? My prediction is that you will choose alternative 2, despite the risk of losing your job and other consequences that might follow from falling out with the company's CEO. But there is an issue. I have hard scientific evidence indicating that this answer might not be 100% true. I'm not saying that you're lying. What I am saying is that there is evidence indicating that your intuition might not be accurate in this specific incident. The trolley problem are constructed to mimic a scientific experiment called the Milgram experiments. In the period from 1961 to 1963, this guy, Stanley Milgram, an American social psychologist, professor at Yale University, conducted a series of experiments that blew the mind off and put shivers down the spine of the psychological community and anyone else who pays attention to science. His experiments showed that most people, more than 60%, will, under circumstances that can be described as normal, kill you if commanded to do so by somebody they perceive as being an authority person. If you haven't heard about the Milgram experiments before, I urge you to go and read about them or see a video. I have linked several videos in the description, or you can read the Wikipedia article. I will give a short account of the experiment here, but not even close to what is needed for you to make up your own mind about it. The reason why I'm urging you to update yourself on this experiment is that the findings are so contradictory to naturally formed intuitions that if these studies was not conducted and replicated with consistent results many times, no one would believe the findings. This is evident from a survey Milgram himself did before he started the experiment amongst senior year psychologists majors at Yale University. On average, they believed that 1.2% of the subjects would give lethal dose of electrical shock. Psychiatrists, students from a medical school, believed that 3.73% of subjects would go all the way after reading the experimental setup. The real number was, as I said, more than 60%. The subjects are told that the experiment is about effects of punishment on learning. On this picture, you see 3 people: the experimenter, E, the teacher, T, and the learner, L. This picture shows the teacher helping the experimenters to strap in the learner. Only the teachers are the subject of the experiment, while both the experimenter and the learner are part of the experiment. The subjects, the teachers, are made to believe that both they and the learner are random participants. Strapping in the learner is just a part of the illusion. In the role of the teacher, they are instructed to give the learner, situated in an adjacent room, on the picture divided by the green line, memory tasks via a 2-way microphone and speaker setup. They were then to administer electrical shocks as punishment if the learner failed the memory tasks. The level of shock administered by the teacher was to be increased for every mistake the learner did. The buttons giving the shock was marked on a scale from mild shock to clearly marked danger severe shock. The real goal of the experiment was to see how many of the subjects in the role of the teacher would go all the way and administer what they themselves believed to be potentially lethal electrical shocks. If the subjects wanted to quit, the experimenter, who was situated in the same room as the teachers, would instruct them to go on. They would do this in a more and more commanding tone. The experiment would continue until the subjects had either administered lethal shock several times, or that the subject denied completely to go on despite clearly being instructed to do so by the experimenter. It was under these conditions that more than 60% of the participants gave what they themselves thought was lethal shock to what they thought was another random participant. And most of them continued to administer shocks several times after they believed that the learner was severely hurt or unconscious or dead. The trolley problem is of course purely hypothetical. The reason why I wanted to transfer what I see as the essentials of the Milgram experiment to the trolley problem was because I think the Milgram experiments are a bit hard to relate to. I will mention what I see as real-life implications of the experiment. The first of these is tied to the original goals of the experiment, namely obedience. Under certain circumstances, people will continue to follow commands even if they go against their own conscience. The second implication is one that I have already mentioned. If we're using naturally formed intuition, we will completely fail to understand the reality of the situation. Most people will follow commands from authority persons, even if, as we see, they lead to morally abominable outcomes and innocent people get severely injured or die. The third is that because we completely underestimate the effect of commander and follower dynamics in human nature, we end up ethically condemning others for actions that most people, or even ourselves, also would do if we were in the same situation. As a result of this, blame game after events like war or conflicts end up like dumpster fires instead of leading to reconciliations. I have tried to transfer the following elements from the Milgram experiment to the trolley problem. First is that the subjects, the teachers in the Milgram experiment, has agreed to follow a procedure that from the offset seems to be problematic, but if followed uncritically will eventually lead to someone getting hurt. The second element is that the authority person removes the responsibility of consequences, either by taking the responsibility upon themselves or by diffusing the responsibility into the situation by saying it's nobody's fault. The bad things that happen because of circumstances and not because of choices you do. Then also that in fact you don't have a choice. You have to go on. The third is that the authority person directly commands the subject to follow the procedure in this specific situation, giving the impression that it's both important and urgent right now. The fourth element is that the cause and effect is somewhat obscured. It's not like pulling the trigger of a gun or stabbing the victim with a knife. It's not a common method of intentional homicide. The question now that we have established that 60% of people will kill you if commanded to do so by an authority person under circumstances that can be considered normal, How do we start a conversation about personal ethics? In this light, can we even talk about personal ethics at all? Well, first we must realize a couple of things. One is that 40% didn't give maximum dose of what they thought was a lethal electrical shock, despite the circumstances. The other is that the vast majority of those who did showed extreme signs of stress and despair when they did. They really didn't want to do it and didn't enjoy it at all. Both those that did and those that didn't give lethal dose of electrical shock saw it as being wrong. The difference was that, seemingly, the strength of the conviction, I like to think of this as personal integrity. I also believe that the results of both the Milgram experiment and the assumed trolley problem would have been different if the subjects were given time to contemplate their actions and debate with their support group like friends or family, let's say if they were given a day to think about it. So then, what can we do? When I started writing this manuscript, I had hoped to be able to report that society has evolved since the 1960s. Taking into consideration that discipline, for better and worse, was more valued and expected trait back then. It was, to a large degree, expected for workers, exemplary, to do their job without questioning, for children to obey their parents without question, and so on. Today you are expected to have an active perspective on right and wrong. You are expected to have opinions about it. Ethics are also in contrast to before thought in a questioning way both to children and adults. In Norway, exemplary, safety first courses, risk analysis and so on are routine on most, if not all, workplaces. All employees are expected to have a relationship with environment, health and safety, EHS. This is meant to imprint everyone with a work ethics. Despite all of this, results of more recent replications of the Milgram experiment are giving the same results as 60 years ago, of around 60% who administered what they perceived as dangerous or lethal electrical shock. The last time the experiment was replicated that I know of was by the Discovery Channel in a segment of Curiosity on October 30th, 2011. How Evil Are You? Was the name of the program. Link to a YouTube video showing this is also linked in the description. Still, I think the focus on personal responsibility and so on do make a difference. It doesn't change our nature and the leader-follower dynamics, but I think it helps building the safety procedures into the system of the workplace and the society. It also tells us something about what is and what isn't a good work environment. I mean, if you find yourself on a workplace where your concerns and opinions are not taken seriously, then you can say with certainty that this is not a good work environment. What about morality? I have talked about morality before on this channel. In this video, morality is it objective? I said that in my mind, morality is an observed phenomenon which can be described as patterns of behaviors that show a preference for actions that intentionally avoid causing harm to others. In the case of the Milgram experiment, I think that given a choice, almost no one would increase the levels of electrical shock into the dangerous levels. I also think that if they were asked afterwards why they didn't give lethal electrical shock if given a choice, they would have thought of the question as absurd. Of course they wouldn't, under any circumstances, give lethal electrical shock to anyone, right? The last thing I will mention before I round this off is that the ability for groups and people to suspend doubt, critical thinking, and consequently also to a certain degree, unfortunately, ethics, is also something, awe-inspiring. As long as it happens in a safe way, of course. I'm exemplary thinking about team sports. But my thoughts also goes to this thing. Imagine when a man of warship that was functioning optimally, one commander would shout an order and hundreds of people would start working in unison, doing individually designed procedures for the ship as a whole to execute the order. A man of warship was of course not even close to be safe for anyone. Anyway, I hope you liked the trolley problem. The idea is that at the end of the day, to create debate and to inspire more people to have an active relationship with how they perceive the world, to promote opinion formation. I firmly believe that a society where opinions are accepted and taken seriously are a better society. Also, when it comes to personal ethics. What do you think? Please write your opinions in the commentary field below. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the view and have a nice day.